Welcome to the Biochemistry Clinic, and today we are looking at the pentose phosphate pathway, which occurs in the cytosol of your cells, and it begins with glucose 6-phosphate. Now we pause a bit. Glucose 6-phosphate is an interesting molecule because it has many routes, as we are going to see. But where glucose 6-phosphate goes largely depends on what the cell needs at that particular moment. Now, if the cell needs ATP more, we know that glucose 6-phosphate can go into glycolysis to produce ATP. So you have to know that. Now, on the other hand, if the body needs NADPH and ribose 5-phosphate, be rest assured that glucose 6-phosphate will be shunted into the pentose phosphate pathway. This pathway has two important phases: the oxidative phase, which makes up the first three irreversible steps, and the non-oxidative phase, which actually has reversible steps. Now, step one is a rate-limiting step in the oxidative phase, and it is characterized by glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme. And take note that your NADPH is produced right in step one and also in step three of the oxidative phase. So you have to know that these steps are the ones that produce NADPH, which we are looking for. And we're going to discuss the importance of NADPH produced in the oxidative phase. Now, going into the non-oxidative phase, we'll have ribulose 5-phosphate, which is a product, of course, of the oxidative phase. So ribulose 5-phosphate can either be epimerized to xylulose 5-phosphate or isomerized to ribose 5-phosphate. Now remember, ribose 5-phosphate is one of the products we're looking for. So from ribulose 5-phosphate, you can easily form ribose 5-phosphate if there is need for RNA and DNA synthesis, because we know this route from ribose 5-phosphate to 5-phosphoribosyl 1-pyrophosphate or PRPP, we are definitely going to produce RNA and DNA in this route. Now, alternatively, if the body does not need any of this, ribulose 5-phosphate can still be converted to xylulose 5-phosphate, which undergoes a series of steps or reactions with ribose 5-phosphate to eventually produce glycerolaldehyde 3-phosphate and fructose 6-phosphate as the major products of the non-oxidative phase. And why are these important? They are important because they are actually intermediates of glycolysis. So it means that the pentose phosphate pathway can still feed glycolysis with glycerolaldehyde 3-phosphate and fructose 6-phosphate so that you can actually produce ATP. And this basically happens mainly when the body needs both ATP and NADPH. You'll find that the body will prefer glucose 6-phosphate, first of all, going into the pentose phosphate pathway to produce NADPH. And once NADPH is produced, ribulose 5-phosphate is converted to xylulose 5-phosphate and then the intermediates of glycolysis into glycolysis to produce ATP. So you're going to find a lot of actually scenarios that have to do with the interplay between glycolysis and pentose phosphate pathway, which is another lecture, of course. It shows exactly how the body will work. When the body just needs ribose 5-phosphate, for instance, without NADPH being needed, it can still go through glycolysis and branch off at the point where you have glycerolaldehyde 3-phosphate and fructose 6-phosphate, so that these can go into the non-oxidative phase of the pentose phosphate pathway to produce ribose 5-phosphate, because these reactions in the non-oxidative phase are actually reversible reactions. So they can move into glycolysis, or you can have intermediates of glycolysis coming into the non-oxidative phase of the pentose phosphate pathway. Now, we quickly come to the importance of the pentose phosphate pathway. Well, it produces two main molecules that we need to focus on. NADPH. Now, this is of critical importance, and you'll be asked many times, why is NADPH important? So we're going to state its role in cholesterol biosynthesis. It's used as a reducing agent, and actually much of this goes into fatty acid synthesis. Very important there. Now, another very important role, the third role that NADPH plays is in reducing oxidative stress of your body. Now, the red blood cells especially have to continuously reduce oxidative stress. Now, how does NADPH reduce oxidative stress? Now, NADPH is important in reducing oxidized form of glutathione, which in its oxidized form may not be helpful in reduction of oxidative stress. So when you reduce glutathione, you are going to help the conversion of things like hydrogen peroxide, for instance, in the red blood cells to water, which is not as toxic as hydrogen peroxide. So that is one critical importance of NADPH. It is used in reducing oxidative stress by converting glutathione into its reduced form, which in turn will help in breaking down hydrogen peroxide to water. Now, if this does not happen, we can have serious clinical consequences, like we see in the deficiency of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme. If this enzyme is deficient, as is the case, because most of the people have this deficiency, so what happens is that NADPH will not be produced. Now, imagine your cells without NADPH, your red blood cells without NADPH, as seen in the cases of the deficiency of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. What is going to happen is that you're going to have an accumulation of reactive oxygen species in your red blood cells, which are going to cause a lot of stress and eventual destruction of the red blood cells, leading to hemolytic anemia. So this is very, very important for you to note, that the presence of NADPH is critical, because when you have NADPH, glutathione will be reduced, and once glutathione is reduced, the glutathione peroxidase is actually able to convert hydrogen peroxide to water, and the cell is safe. Apart from that, you see that ribose 5-phosphate may not be formed if there is a deficiency of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. However, in conclusion, I want you to know that the deficiency of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase actually plays a critical role. Most of the people that are deficient in this enzyme have partial protection against malaria, and you know your guess is as good as mine.